Johnny Cash, one of the most successful and influential musical artists of all time. Johnny was born February 26th of 1932 in Arkansas to parents Ray and Carrie Cash, one of 6 siblings including Reba, Tommy, Jack, Margaret, and Joanne. From the age of 3 years old, Johnny would work on his family's cotton farm in Arkansas, singing all day long, and due to a flood they had, inspired a future song of his entitled 5 Feet High and Rising. Unfortunately, in May of 1944, when Johnny was only 12 years old, his older brother Jack would get killed via an accident with a table saw that nearly cut Jack in half. From the age of 12, Johnny was obsessed with writing and singing his own music. Dennis Day was his first massive influence via the local radio station and traditional Irish music. Shortly after Johnny's passing, my mother's hymn book would release, which would be full of traditional gospel songs. Johnny would serve in the Air Force for 4 years, beginning in 1950. He would work as a Morse code operator intercepting Soviet Army transmissions. In July of 1954, Johnny would be honorably discharged after 4 years of service and would go home back to Texas. During his time in the Air Force, Johnny would actually develop a cyst on the right side of his chin that would require surgery, thus giving him that distinctive scar for the rest of his life. Fresh out of the service in 1954, Johnny and Vivian would move to Memphis, and he would sell appliances from door to door. Come nighttime, he would often have jam sessions with Marshall Grant and Luther Perkins, who were known as the Tennessee Two. Johnny was dead set on auditioning for Sun Records, bombarding them with phone calls and being shot down numerous times, at a point in which he sat on the porch of the studio until the manager, Sam Phillips, finally gave him a shot. Hey Porter and Cry 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 impressed Sam Phillips and Sun Records so much, he was given a deal, and from there, Johnny Cash was off and running. Elvis actually stopped by for a visit in late 1956 while Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis were recording. Johnny Cash joined in, and the $1 Million Quartet was formed. Pictures were taken, videos were made, and it became historic. Johnny would go on to release Folsom Prison Blues not long after that, which made the country top 5. I Walk the Line was number 1 on country and entered Pop Charts 20, and then Home of the Blues, coming in 1957. Elvis had already left Sun Records, and Johnny was feeling like he was being underpaid, and they were focusing more on Jerry Lee Lewis. So in 1958, Johnny would leave Sun Records and sign with Columbia. In the beginning of 1959, Johnny would perform his first of many prison concerts, the first one being in San Quentin. Amongst the inmates that watched was Merle Haggard, a young 20-year-old who would come out of this concert finding the right path to success and becoming a country music legend. Don't Take Your Guns to Town was the first single released under Columbia, and to that point was one of the biggest songs of his career. Sun Records actually kept releasing backlog material that Johnny had had up until late 1964. Johnny was also deemed The Undertaker. Not that one. For his wardrobe, he always wore black, he always felt black would match, and he always felt black looked the best. In the late 1950s, Johnny began drinking heavily and became addicted to amphetamines and barbiturates. He used them to stay awake, and even while addicted, he created the Ring of Fire, which would hit number 1 on country and entered the top 20. In pop. Vivian's book, I Walk the Line, it was actually said that Johnny's future sister-in-law, Anita, wrote Ring of Fire, and Johnny just added mariachi-style horns to it. Johnny would adopt it and would go on and give Anita half credit for the masterpiece. In the early 60s, Johnny would go on to cover Oh Lonesome Me, which is originally a Don Gibson song from the late 50s. This song would go on to become number 13 on the country chart. In the mid-60s, Johnny released concept albums. Bitter Tears, coming out in 1964, addressed Native Americans' mistreatment. It climbed the charts rapidly, but was met with extreme backlash for controversial takes on social issues. Bitter Tears, and specifically The Ballad of Ira Hayes, was neglected by non-political radio at the time and was denied all promotion due to protesting. Johnny made a letter in August of '64 calling out the industry as cowardly. He kept promoting the song through disc jockeys, and eventually The Ballad of Ira Hayes would reach number 3 on the country charts, and the album itself would reach number 2. In the mid-60s, after severe drug addiction and destructive behavior, Johnny and Vivian, his wife, would divorce, and he would go on to cancel performances. In May of 1965, Johnny would be arrested in Mississippi for trespassing late on private property for picking flowers. In June of 1965, Johnny's camper would catch fire during a fishing trip with his nephew, and after nearly dying, Johnny claimed the fire was caused by sparks from a defective exhaust system. Johnny's own nephew, Damon, claimed that the fire was started because Johnny wanted to stay warm but was too messed up on drugs to realize it worsening. Regardless, the fire destroyed 508 acres, and Johnny was sued by the federal government. The federal government wanted $125,000 for all the damage that Johnny's camper's fire caused. However, they reached a settlement in which Johnny would pay $82,000. In October of 1965 in El Paso, Texas, Johnny was arrested by a narcotics squad. Originally suspecting heroin, it was instead 688 amphetamines and 475 tranquilizers. Because it was prescription, he got a suspended sentence and was posted on a $1,500 bond. In 1967, Johnny and his future wife, June, would release Jackson, which would go on to win a Grammy. Johnny was once again arrested in 1967 after having a bag of prescription pills in a car wreck. After attempting to bribe the deputy, he would spend the night in jail. Sheriff Ralph Jones would release Johnny after a long talk about behavior and wasted potential. Johnny would then go on to credit this for his reasoning for sobriety. Johnny would later return to Lafayette for a benefit concert, which attracted 12,000 people and raised $75,000 for the local high school. After proposing to June in February of 1968 at a concert in Canada, they would go on to marry March 1st of that year in Franklin, Kentucky. Johnny would go on to become a born-again Christian, taking an altar call in Nashville by Jimmy Rogers Snow, who was the son of legendary musician Hank Snow. A decade after his first famous prison concert, Johnny would lead a highly successful live album entitled Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison, and the very next year, Johnny Cash at San Quentin. In comparison, his prison concerts were much more successful than his later albums, such as Strawberry Cake, which was recorded in London and live at MSG, which peaked at number 33 and 39 on album charts. In 1969, Johnny also became an international hit when he topped the Beatles by selling 6.5 million albums. From June of 1969 to March of 1971, Johnny starred in The Johnny Cash Show on ABC. The Statler brothers would open up every episode for The Johnny Cash Show. Obviously, alongside Johnny, the Carter family and Carl Perkins were regulars on the show. Ray Charles, Neil Young, Louis Armstrong, and many more served as guests on The Johnny Cash Show. About a month before the show was off the air, Johnny performed The Man in Black, which still, to this day, is one of the best live performances you'll ever see. Johnny's love for performing in front of prisons actually motivated him to meet with President Richard Nixon in 1972 to discuss prison reform. Johnny would perform live at Österåker Prison in Sweden in 1972, the live album dropping in 1973. In 1976, a concert at Tennessee State Prison was videotaped for TV, and a belated CD came out after Johnny's death entitled A Concert Behind Prison Walls. Johnny would once again begin using amphetamines in 1977, and by 1983 became addicted and had to be admitted into the Betty Ford Clinic. Throughout the mid-80s, Johnny formed a group called the Highwaymen, with Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and his close friend, Waylon Jennings. They would go on to enjoy good success, including 3 albums, Highwaymen, Highwaymen 2, and Highwaymen The Road Goes On Forever. Between 1981 and 1984, Johnny recorded with Billy Sherrill, but it was shelved. It would not be released until 2014 by Legacy Records entitled Out Amongst the Stars. Johnny tested his luck with acting in 1981, starring in The Pride of Jesse Hallam, which had good reviews for calling attention to adult illiteracy. In 1983, he would go on to star as the sheriff in A Murder in Coweta County, based off of a real-life story where he co-starred with Andy Griffith. In 1984, a self-parody entitled The Chicken in Black was released, and it was about Johnny having his brain transplanted into a chicken, and Johnny receiving a bank robber's brain in return. In his 2013 book, Johnny Cash to Life, Robert Hilburn disputes the claim that Johnny chose to record this in protest of Columbia's treatment. Hilburn then says they proposed it and Johnny loved it. It wasn't until Waylon Jennings told Johnny he looked like a buffoon in the video, which then Johnny demanded that Columbia withdraw all of it, interrupting its chart success. In July of 1986, after nearly 30 years together, Columbia would drop Johnny Cash. In 1986, Johnny would return to Sun Studios in Memphis to team up with Ray Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins to create an album entitled The Class of 55. That same year, Johnny would publish his only novel, A Man in White, a book about the Apostle Paul. He would also go on to record Johnny Cash Reads the Complete New Testament in 1990. At a hospital visit in 1988 when he was checking on Waylon, who just had a heart attack, Waylon suggested that Johnny had his own heart condition checked out. Johnny would then have double bypass surgery, although Cash refused painkillers out of fear of relapse. Johnny would then go on to say he had a near-death experience during surgery. In 1988, Mark Riley and John Langford put together Till Things Are Brighter, a tribute album featuring British-based indie rock interpretations of Johnny Cash's songs. His daughter Roseanne would go on and say he felt very validated and this was a huge boost to him. Johnny would have an unsuccessful stint with Mercury Records from 1987 to 1991. During that time, he recorded new versions of his old songs such as Water from the Wells of Home, which paired him with his kids Roseanne, Johnny Jr., and the great Paul McCartney. In 1991, Johnny would sing The Man in Black for the Christian punk band One Bad Pigs in their album Scream Sunday. The very next year, Johnny would go on and sing The Wanderer, which was the closing track for U2's album Zeropa. In 1994, Rick Rubin offered Johnny a deal at his American Recordings label. He recorded in his living room accompanied by his Martin Drano guitar, one of many he played in his career. Due to his work, Johnny would go on to win a Grammy in 1994 for Best Contemporary Folk Album. Johnny would go on to team up with Brooks and Dunn to contribute Folsom Prison Blues to the AIDS benefit album Red Hot Plus Country, produced by the Red Hot organization. And on that same album, Johnny would perform Forever Young, which is a cover from Bob Dylan. Shortly after that, Johnny was joined by Kim Thayil of Soundgarden, bassist Chris Novoselic of Nirvana, and drummer Sean Kinney of Alice in Chains to cover Willie Nelson's Time of the Preacher. In 1996, Johnny would collab with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers on Unchained, which won Best Country Album in 1998. In 1997, on a trip to New York, Johnny was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease, Shy-Drager syndrome. He was originally misdiagnosed as Parkinson's and was only given 18 months to live. During the last stage of his career, Johnny released American 3, Solitary Man, and American 4, The Man Comes Around. American 4 included several songs by several late 20th century rock artists like Hurt from Nine Inch Nails and Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode. Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, who originally wrote Hurt, was skeptical about Johnny's plan to cover it, but he was impressed and moved by it. The video for Hurt was critically acclaimed, but it won a Grammy. Johnny's wife, June, officially passed away May 15th of 2003, at the age of 73. June told Johnny to keep working, so he did, completing 60 songs in the last 4 months of his life. Johnny would even do surprise shows at the Carter family fold outside of Bristol, Virginia in the last few months of his life. Rick Rubin would later state that Johnny was torn up when June died predictably, and Johnny wanted to keep working, otherwise he was going to be next. Johnny's final recordings were in August of 2003 and consisted of Like the 309 and Engine 143, which were both on his final album, American 5: 100 Highways, that would release in 2006.